Hello, everybody, and welcome to the 20th episode of this year's season of the Lions Grit. I'm joined today by Mr. Joseph Wilmot. Joe, thanks for joining me here for a special Saturday edition of the show and being flexible. Thursday night, I had to take somebody to the airport, and then which is our usual time, and then I came down with a stomach flu. So I appreciate everyone being flexible with me, and Joe, for you sticking with me and coming on the show today to talk some Lions and some Cowboys. How are you doing today, Joe?
Doing good.
Good. As always, we will keep a similar format to what we do during our normal regular show. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and we'll take a recap of what happened in Week 16. Of course, one of the Week 17 games has already happened between the Browns and who were the Browns? The Browns were playing the Jets. But we'll take a look back here and stick to the Week 16 side of things and get it started. So let's get it up here and go ahead and walk through what happened back here in Week 16 of the NFL action. The week got started off with a important race for the NFC playoffs important game for the NFC playoff race. You had the Rams and the Saints. The Rams were able to get that win 30-22, and the Rams offense is still looking pretty red hot. We had a matchup in the AFC North between the Bengals and the Steelers. Mason Rudolph and co. getting a 34-11 victory over the Bengals. Then we had the Bills traveling to LA to take on the Chargers, and the Bills getting a 24-22 victory. The Jets were able to hold off the Commanders and get a 30-28 victory. Of course, the Lions were able to clinch their first NFC North title and their first division title since 1993 by beating the Vikings 30-24. We'll talk more about that game in just a moment, Joe. And then we had the Browns beating the Texans 36-22. We had the Packers beating the Panthers 33-20. We had the Seahawks moving into the playoff picture for the NFC North, for the NFC, getting a 20-17 victory over the Titans. We had the Colts losing to the Falcons, 29-10 was the score there. We had the Jacksonville Jaguars squaring off with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a battle of the state of Florida, and the Buccaneers coming out on top in that one, 30-12. Then we had a good game between the Dolphins and the Cowboys. The Dolphins proving they can finally beat a good team, getting a 22-20 victory at home. The Bears were able to keep their playoffs dreams alive with a 27-16 victory over the Cardinals. The Patriots were able to get a Christmas Eve victory against the Broncos, 26-23. The Broncos still technically alive, but definitely hurt their playoff chances, and we'll talk about it in a minute. There's also been a change at the quarterback position now for the Denver Broncos. The Raiders were able to get a 20-14 victory in Kansas City. So the Chiefs unable to claim the AFC West title with that loss to the Raiders, and the Raiders keeping their playoff hopes alive as well in the process. The Giants traveled to Philadelphia and lost that game 33-25 between NFC East rivals. And then finally, the game of the week, potentially a Super Bowl preview. You had the Baltimore Ravens going to San Francisco to take on the 49ers, and the Ravens winning that game 33-19. Showing that they may very well be, Joe, the best team in the NFL currently. So we'll talk a little bit more about them as well here in just a second. But before we take a look back at any of these games, Joe, was there anything really from this past weekend that surprised you in terms of the games?
Not that I could see, no.
Yeah, I think really, the most surprising thing, I think, to me was the fact that you had so many AFC South teams with the Colts, the Texans, and the Jaguars. All four of the teams in the AFC South, including the Titans, they all lost. But those three teams, the Texans, the Colts, and the Jaguars, are all fighting for a playoff spot, and all of those teams lost. None of them seemed to want to win to get to the playoffs. So I think that was the most surprising, that you saw all of those teams lose. I mean, with the Texans, they're missing C.J. Stroud, so it makes a little bit of sense. With Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence did get knocked out of that game against Tampa Bay. So there's definitely reasons for it, but the Colts losing to the Falcons was definitely a little bit of a surprise there. So it's going to be interesting to see who steps up and actually wants to win that AFC South, because right now it's not looking good for any of the teams down there. They're kind of sort of backing their way into the playoffs. But now time to turn to a team that isn't backing their way into the playoffs, Joe. At least we hope so. They came out, and it wasn't necessarily the prettiest game we've ever seen out of the Lions, but they certainly came out here and they were able to get a victory in Minnesota. And like I said, they were able to clinch that NFC North title with that 30-24 win. Again, it's their first division title since the NFC since 1993. And of course, the NFC Central became the NFC North in 2002. So since they hadn't won since 1993, it's their first ever NFC North title. It's a big win for the Lions. Even though it wasn't the prettiest, it's definitely an impactful one. The Lions improved 11 wins on the season, which is the first time they've done that since 2014. And it guarantees that they will play at least their first playoff game at home in Ford Field, and it guarantees them at least the number 3 spot in this NFC bracket of the playoffs. So they have the potential, depending on what happens here. Unfortunately, it's not completely in their control. Of course, if they win out here against the Cowboys, who they're playing this week, next week they play Minnesota, definitely have a shot at that number 1 seed, Joe. But it requires some action on the 49ers and the Eagles part as well. If those two teams win out, it makes it difficult for the Lions. But first things first, the Lions have to take care of business themselves. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. Of course, the biggest test, I think, is this upcoming game later on this evening with the Cowboys, and we'll talk about that. But, Joe, I think some of the more impressive things that we've been seeing out of the Lions, and we saw it even in this game against the Vikings, was the Lions' running game, that two-headed monster between Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. Gibbs had 2 rushing touchdowns. Montgomery had 1 himself. What are your thoughts about the Lions' running game, Joe? How do you think it's doing here as we head towards the playoffs? Do you think it's something the team will be able to count on moving forward?
Yeah, we have an opportunity to have 2 running backs gain over 1,000 yards each in the season. I don't know if that's ever been done before in NFL history, but I know Montgomery is less than 100 yards away, and Gibbs is just over 100 yards away from it. So if they can muster up, 100 yards between the two of them, in each game, they're going to have, 1,000 yards each, and should really be looked at as the best combo running back field in pro football. I play Madden, and the Gibbs is the speed back. He gets out in open space. He can have breakaway speed, and he can make people miss. You give it to David Montgomery, he's got breakaway speed too, but he's more of a brawler. He gets in there and he can take a tackle and lean forward. It's that extra yard or 2 that he gets from leaning forward that is so pivotal in the Detroit Lions' success, because when you get stopped at the line of scrimmage and you're able to lean forward for 2 yards and you get a 3 down to convert for a first down, and you get 3 yards on 3rd down and you only needed 2 to get the first down, those 2 yards that were pivotal on first down getting stopped at the line of scrimmage, yeah, you needed the 3 yards. Yeah, you needed the 2 yards. You got the first down by 1 yard because Montgomery got the 2 yards on first down by leaning forward. These are the type of things that matter in football. You may say, oh, it's only 2 yards. 2 yards is a big differential. If you can't gain 2 yards on the goal line, in the middle of the field, in the back of the end zone, when your back's up against the wall, then you are in serious trouble in the NFL. And the Lions have proven that they don't have that problem this year so far.
Yeah, I think it speaks a lot to the types of players that Dan Quinn and Brad Holmes have brought in. It's definitely part of the culture, that take the kneecaps, the ability to take
Dan
punches
Campbell,
and get back up.
Dan Campbell.
Yep, Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes. I think they're both doing a good job of bringing in the players and coaching them up and really building up that culture that we're seeing here. And David Montgomery is definitely a great example of it. And the thing too I like about both running backs is, Joe, you mentioned, Montgomery isn't necessarily slow. And Gibbs too, he can run in between the tackles too. So even though they both have different things that they excel at, they both can also do the things that the other one does as well, which makes it difficult for defenses because when you put one of them out there and you're like, okay, Gibbs is going to go to the outside and then he runs it to the inside and he does it very, he can do that competently. It makes it hard on a defense because it's like, okay, well, we know that this guy is supposed to be the speed back, but he can still take a hit. What are we? How do we defend against that? So it keeps defenses guessing, and definitely what Ben Johnson and this offense is doing, keeping defenses on their heels has been great. And of course, having our starting O-line in there has been fantastic. Getting Frank Ragnow back, I know him and Graham Glasgow were the two highest rated. Frank Ragnow was the highest rated center last week, and then Graham Glasgow was the highest rated offensive lineman last week. So big props to the offensive line who have been helping those two running backs have the success they've had. And then, of course, through the passing game, St. Brown this past week against the Vikings also had a monster day. He had 12 catches, he had 106 yards, and he had a touchdown. It's his 8th game going over 100 yards on the season. He has over 100 receptions this year, and he is the 5th player in NFL history to produce 2 seasons with 100 receptions and 1,000 receiving yards within the first 3 of their career seasons. So I know he's also chasing Justin Jefferson and a couple other guys for some of the records for having like the most yards through their first 3 seasons. But shout out to St. Brown because he has definitely been he's not always the flashiest guy necessarily on the Lions offense, but he's always there contributing. And we're seeing him he's consistent, right? He's there for Jared Goff and he just puts up consistently good numbers. So, big shout out to him in this passing game. And speaking of the passing game, Joe, you talked about how important in previous weeks about how important it was for Jared Goff to play well. In this past week against the Vikings, he finished 30 of 40 for 257 yards with a touchdown, and more importantly, no interceptions in the game, and a passer rating of 99.7. Joe, do you think if Jared Goff can continue to take care of the ball the way he has been the last couple of weeks, when they were sort of in a little bit of a slump there, the issue was, turnovers, particularly turnovers from Jared Goff. Do you think now that it seems that he's settled down and they've gotten things figured out, do you think he can get back to playing at a level that can get these Lions to not only get their first playoff win, but potentially make a playoff run?
They need to not overexert themselves. They don't need to play Dallas like it's a must-win game. They don't need to play Minnesota like it's a must-win game. Do what you got to do to prepare for the playoffs. You clinch the division. You got a home field playoff game. Okay, now what you need to do is you need to win your home playoff game. I don't care what position happens to you. If you're the third best team going into the playoffs, as far as home field and winning the division or even whatever it is. I think there's 3 divisions in each conference. Yeah. So you need to win the home playoff game. I don't care about Dallas. I don't care about Minnesota. The rest of these games on this schedule are meaningless. It may matter for Dallas and Philadelphia to duke it out because they're still competing for the division. Yeah. So Detroit's not in a must-win situation. So we're looking at preparing ourselves for the playoffs. We want to run some more critical plays, some more situational game planning against Dallas, which is a good team, and we want to see how we manage these games in order to be able to handle a home playoff game and give our fans, give our Detroit City a home playoff win with the Detroit Lions. That's what this season is about. You win that game, wild card weekend, whatever, you win that game, okay, all of a sudden you're in the playoffs, and things are getting real now. It's like the first week of the playoffs is pretenders versus contenders. So, if the Lions are contenders, they'll have to win their home playoff football game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is going to be an important week for the Lions. It does give us a good chance to see how they stack up against another team that is, going to be going into the playoffs as, a team that's considered a contender. So it'll be nice to see how we stack up against them. And I think one of the nice things that we've seen too is a turnaround on this defense lately. And it was led this past week by the defensive backs who forced 4 interceptions, 4 turnovers. You had Kirby Joseph, who had 2 interceptions. You had Melifonwu, who had his first interception, and then you also had Brian Branch, who got one. So, defense stepping up there, and we saw it last year when the defense made their surge to help them go on that big winning stretch to end of the season. Forcing turnovers can be a great way to help mask some of the problems you have on defense. And so it's good to see that we're starting to generate more takeaways. Melifonwu has been a great addition the last couple of weeks. He actually got named the Defensive Player of the Week for the NFC based off of this past game. So having him step up in the secondary has been great. And we're starting to get CJ Gardner-Johnson isn't going to be back for this week, but he's back practicing with the team and should definitely be back in time for the playoffs, as well as James Houston. So we're starting to see some pieces come back. And so, we've seen this defense play well. I'm definitely excited about the fact that we're seeing them, again, generate takeaways and turnovers. So how are you feeling about the defense, Joe? Do you think they've played better over the last couple of weeks?
No, they give up an average of 20 points a game. They need to perform well enough for our offense to get more points than what they give up on defense. I mean, our defense hasn't been a strong point all season, but it hasn't cost us but yet 4 games. The most pivotal game that has cost us was week 2 against Seattle. Are we going to have a week 2 against Seattle, or are we going to have a week 8 or whatever week it was against the Baltimore Ravens? I don't know what it is, but they can't be putting up points early on this Detroit Lions team. They can't be giving up points late when we're trying to come back in the football game. This defense needs to play pivotal. They need to play clutch, which at times they've proven they can do. Yes. What I mean, if there's something to work on in this game, it's clutch play by the defense.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things play out because the defense will be needed. We'll talk a little bit more about this when we do our
defender defense of the universe. They need to defend the universe.
The Cowboys' offense is very good at home, scoring a league high.
Lion of Judah.
39.9 points per game. So we'll have to see if the defense can bring it to play because we know that the Cowboys' offense will certainly be turned on here at home. So with that in mind, Joe, let's go to our champs and chumps for the week here. My champ is going to be, I already sort of talked about him a little bit, but Melifonwu, the safety for the Lions. Again, he was named the Defensive Player of the Week with his 5 tackles, his 2 sacks, his 2 passes defended, and his 1 interception, including that one that sort of iced the game for us as the Vikings were driving down the field to potentially score. He got that interception on the 5-yard line and sealed that NFC North title for us. So Melifonwu is my champ of the week. And then my chump is going to be the Denver Broncos. We'll talk a little bit more about it here in our buy or sell segment. But of course, Sean Payton and the Broncos have decided to bench Russell Wilson as their starting quarterback in order to avoid potentially having to pay him. I think it's either $34 or $37 million, depending on if he gets hurt due to an injury clause in his contract. And of course, the Broncos are not out of playoff contention just yet. But it seems to me a little bit disrespectful to a guy who has been a great steward of the sport of football in general. He's been a great pro since he's been in the NFL. He's a Walter Payton Player of the Year, Man of the Year recipient. He's overall just a pretty good human being. I don't fault them for not wanting to pay him that extra money, and I'm not upset that Russell Wilson isn't getting that extra money, but I think there was a better way for the story to play out other than them benching him seemingly when they had a chance to compete for a playoff spot just so that they don't have to pay him extra money. So yeah, I'm going with the Broncos being my chump of the week. Joe, who do you have as your champ and who do you have as your chump?
My champ is Florida State, finishing the season undefeated. They should be in the college football playoff over Alabama. And my chump is Ohio State, who not only lost to Michigan, but lost the Cotton Bowl last night. So, yeah, go Florida State, and tough luck for Ohio State University. That's college football. I don't chime in on college football. Why? Because I don't like college football. But I will be watching Michigan play Alabama, and that's going to be a tough football game for Michigan to win. But I think if they win that, then they could possibly win the national championship. I mean, it doesn't get more stupid than that, like possibly if they're in the national championship game, that they could possibly win the national championship. I mean, that's obvious.
Hey, you had some good choices there, Joe. And Ed's chiming in here. He's going his champ, the Lions, of course, the division champs, and his chumps, all the players in the NCAA who are opting out of the bowl games. I know for that Oregon State Notre Dame game, I'm pretty sure like every starter on Notre Dame's offense pretty much sat out of that game. So it is kind of disheartening that you're seeing all these players choose to opt out of the bowl games. Of course, we have seen plenty of players get injured as they're headed into the draft, but it's still the weird thing. The bowl games used to mean something. Players used to love playing in them, but it feels we're definitely in a different time and age now, and it's not as it's definitely not fun to watch.
They sit out of the bowl games to get drafted in the third or fourth round, or maybe the first or second, and then they break their leg, and then they can't play, and then they have a terrible career, and they're like, why didn't I compete for some bowl game in college? I mean, maybe if the bowl games weren't all advertisements, maybe if it wasn't Tony the Tiger or Idaho Potato or the FedEx Tax Slayer, maybe if they actually put real names on these bowl games, that players would want to compete in them instead of making them some product endorsed championship,
Yeah, I think there was the Pop-Tart one that I saw with the guy. They actually had a Pop-Tart pop out of a makeshift microwave. That seemed a little over the top, a little much there.
Yeah, American culture and the corporate society, they really know how to party, don't they?
Well, let's. It's a great way to transition. I think we're both sells on that one. So let's go around here now and do some buy or sell with some other topics from the NFL itself, Joe. Starting off, we talked a little bit about the struggles of the AFC South. In particular, the Jacksonville Jaguars, they currently hold lead in the AFC South, but Trevor Lawrence is a no-go today. Are you buying or selling the idea that the Jacksonville Jaguars will miss the playoffs?
No, they'll make the playoffs, and they'll make a run in the playoffs.
All right. Joe's coming in strong with that. I definitely think it doesn't help not having Trevor Lawrence in this game. I'm not sure if CJ Beathard can get the job done, but definitely the thing that helps them out is the fact that the Colts and the Texans haven't looked good either, and those are really their two biggest. Those are the two teams that they are competing with against to win this title to get the AFC South title. So this is really kind of a coin flip for me. I don't feel really confident in CJ Beathard. I like Jacksonville overall, but I don't know if missing Trevor Lawrence they can get the job done. But I'm gonna sell on this one too. We're heading into the new year. We'll be optimistic. I'm gonna say that Jacksonville can get the job done, but it's not gonna be easy. Speaking of quarterbacks, Joe, the first of one of two potential quarterback eras coming to an end. This first one here being with Sam Howell. Do you think his time as the starting quarterback is over for the Washington Commanders?
No, he'll be back next year, and if he's not the starter, he'll be a backup. I don't think his time's over with the Commanders.
Yeah, I definitely think he'll probably stick with the roster, and I definitely could see him playing a backup role. But I imagine there's going to be some sweeping changes with the Washington Commanders in this one. And with that in mind, I could definitely see them trying to, you're going to be bringing in a new head coach, a new GM, all that good stuff because you have the new ownership group. I could see him sticking around as a as a backup, but I definitely think they're going to be looking for a new starting quarterback. So I'm going to buy this and say his time as the starting quarterback is over, and we may see him coming in a backup role, but I think they're going to move on from him overall. And quickly, Edward chiming in regarding Jacksonville here. He's going to buy that one thing, saying Lawrence is a key factor, and then when it comes to the Sam Howell era, he's going to sell new coaching staff. He's going to agree with you, but they may go and find a different starter. All right. Next up, we have a question here about the Baltimore Ravens, Joe. Of course, they're coming off that victory over the San Francisco 49ers, who many people considered to be the best offense in the NFL. They made a big statement on defense, forcing Brock Purdy to throw 4 interceptions. They also knocked him out of that game. And then who's their backup quarterback? He came in through interception. He used to be the Jets QB. I'm forgetting his name, but I can't think of it. What's his name? Sam Darnold. Sam Darnold is his name. So they forced 5 interceptions in that game. Considering the way they played and sort of made a statement there to the rest of the NFL, do you think that the Baltimore Ravens have the best defense in the NFL?
The Baltimore Ravens, yeah, they've been winning. They've been winning against good teams. They've been going full frontal, full force, full adrenaline into the playoffs. They're going to hit a speed bump. Their train tracks are going to get derailed. They're going to fall off the train tracks, and they're going to have a bad game in the playoffs, and they're going to lose in the playoffs. Might be to Kansas City. This is an upset alert. And what's going to happen is they're going to get points put up on them. I don't care about their defense in the regular season. It's what have you done for me lately? And I'm telling you, their defense is really good. Is it the best in the NFL? Maybe throughout the course of the season. But we're talking playoffs, and are they going to be able to perform in the playoffs?
That's why they play the games. We'll have to see. I think I'm going to buy this one, and I'm going to base it off of just what we've seen. Based off how they've played, I think they are currently the best defense in the NFL. Of course, things change from week to week. So as we get into the playoffs, Joe, very well could be one of those things where they do have a stinker game that ends up costing them. And Edward here is going to be, he's going buying into the results. Next up, we have a question about the Miami Dolphins. After beating Dallas, have the Dolphins proved that they are now contenders and not pretenders? This, of course, being one of the few winning football teams they've beaten this season, getting that tough win against the Cowboys at home. It was a 22-20 victory. Of course, the Cowboys aren't very good at home, but what are your thoughts here, Joe? You buying or selling the fact that the Dolphins have proven they are contenders?
Yeah, the Dolphins are contenders. I'd like to see a Lions versus Dolphins Super Bowl. That'd be a win-win.
That would be a very interesting game. Both two teams that excel too, playing in inside and warmer weather. So that could be a very, very exciting game. Now that you mention it, that would not be definitely be entertaining, I think. And yeah, I think the Dolphins, it was a gritty win. They found a way to get that fourth quarter drive to secure the victory. So I think the Dolphins are a good team. I think they aren't necessarily a great team, but I think they have just enough where they can get victories and beat most teams. And, looking around.
They caused the Denver Broncos to have a break of 70 points in the season. If you can put up 70 points on anybody, your offense can explode.
Yep. You always have to. They are a team of track stars. You have to watch out for them. And Ed here, he's going to sell. Good team, but he doesn't think they can consistently beat great teams. And I think that's a fair point. My only thing taking a look around the league is outside of the Ravens, a lot of the other teams that we thought were great, maybe like the 49ers and the Eagles, Kansas City, a lot of them are showing that they're not as invulnerable as we thought, that they have. Most teams here have some pretty serious flaws. So it depends on who can get hot as we get into the playoffs here. And Joe, as you mentioned, with being able to put up 70 points in a game, when the Dolphins are hot, they're hot. So they definitely have the weapons needed to get victories. Speaking of another quarterback whose time may be over, Tommy DeVito, Tommy Cutlets, mania is over New York. He was benched this past weekend for Tyrod Taylor. Do you think we've seen the last of Tommy DeVito, Joe?
Yeah, Tommy DeVito's time is done in New York.
Yeah, it was a nice story. It was great that he was coming from New York. And his family was there.
And Tommy DeVito,
tailgates.
his time is done. He's not moving on. New York don't want him. He's out. Goodbye.
Yeah, I know. If anyone listens to 97.1 The Ticket, Mike Valeni, of course, is a big fan of the Giants in New York football. Everyone else was all hyped about Tommy DeVito and talking about how good of a story it was, and he was always very upset because he kept getting wins and it kept hurting their draft position. And now, of course, with him getting benched, it just makes Mike Valeni look even more right, because it's like, what was the point? It just cost some draft position. So, the nightmare continues there. If you're a fan of the New York Giants, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. Daniel Jones, of course, is going to be healthy next year. It's going to be weird to see what they do at that QB position. But I think Tommy DeVito is done. And Ed here is loving it, Joe, and he's agreeing with us, buying it, that Tommy DeVito's time, the Tommy DeVito mania, is at an end. Something that may not be at an end here, the Las Vegas Raiders should hire Antonio Pierce as their head coach. They were able, of course, last week to go into Kansas City and get a win against those division rival Chiefs. Joe, what are your thoughts here? Are you buying or selling the fact that Antonio Pierce should be the Raiders' next head coach?
I don't care about the Las Vegas Raiders until they move back to Oakland. I don't want to say Las Vegas Raiders. They don't have a good ring to it. They moved them out of Oakland. Does everybody in Las Vegas really love the Raiders? Why were they moved out of California? I don't know. Am I going to get used to it? For so long, I was a fan of the Oakland Raiders. They were a historic franchise, and now they're in Las Vegas. Come on.
Yeah, it's definitely it's weird. I don't mind Las Vegas having a team, but it being the Raiders, I know I've made the mistake at some point when we were putting together the stuff for the show, where I definitely had them listed as the Oakland Raiders in a few of them. So I'm still not used to it. It definitely sounds weird, but I definitely like the idea of them hiring Antonio Pierce as their head coach. I like what he's done. This team seems to play hard for him. I think they still have a lot of work to do with the roster, including finding a reliable starting quarterback. But that being said, I'm really becoming a fan here lately of the former players turned into coaches, just because of the fact that the former players really know how to lead a team, right? They're good leaders. They know what it's like to put on those pads and to go out there and play on Sundays, and really do a good job of motivating, the team. So I think you can add in coordinators to do the X's and O's. So I think, Antonio Pierce has done enough to show that he can lead this team, and that the team responds to him. So I'm going to buy this one. I think Antonio Pierce should get a shot as the full-time head coach for the Raiders. I mean, he can't do any worse than other Raiders head coaches have done. So speaking of good head coaches, the Steelers, it seems like Mike Tomlin always has some sort of trick up his sleeve to finish the season with a winning record. They were able to get a win against their rival Cincinnati Bengals with Mason Rudolph, their third string quarterback in, Joe. Are you buying or selling the idea that the Steelers will finish the season with a winning record and keep Coach Mike Tomlin's streak of not having a losing season intact? This is his 17th season as the head coach of the Steelers. He's had 16 winning seasons. Do you think he can make it 17 with this group of Steelers? They're currently sitting at 8-7, so he's got 2 games to do it.
Even if he finished 2 games, yeah. All he needs to do is win 1 more game. So yeah.
Yep. They're playing Seattle this week, which could be a tough game for them, and then next week they are playing, in the final week, they are playing the Ravens, which you definitely would think of those 2 teams, the Seahawks are probably their best chance of getting that win. But
unless the Ravens lock up the number 1 seed and rest their starters.
That's true. They very well could do that. Although it's hard to say because I would imagine they'll probably do that because it's the smart thing to do. But those AFC North teams, they do not like each other, and so the Ravens and the Steelers definitely have that rivalry. So they may, out of spite, want to be that team that gives him his first losing season. I could see that being a possibility, but I would hate to see them jeopardize their playoff potential just to put a losing season on his record for just spite. And then I believe that Ed here, this is in regards to the Raiders, that he's buying and pulling for it, that being Antonio Pierce being the head coach, and that the quarterback search will be on for the Raiders. Speaking of quarterbacks, Joe, what are your thoughts here about Sean Payton's decision to bench Russell Wilson for Jarrett Stidham?
Yeah, Russell Wilson needs to figure out his future, and so does Denver. So they need to save money. They're saving money. They don't want him to get injured. It's a good decision by both teams. Denver's out of the playoffs. It's a good decision.
Well, see, Denver is still technically alive in the playoffs, which is the only part of this that makes
they're not going anywhere. They got too many flaws.
A lot of it is going to come down to what happens with Kansas City, and they're playing the Chargers, or the Broncos are playing the Chargers this week, and they're playing the Raiders the last week. So, it's a long shot certainly for them to make the playoffs. But I think they would have a better chance of making the playoffs with Russell Wilson than they do with Jarrett Stidham. But I understand, that is a lot of money that if he would get hurt and wouldn't be able to pass that physical, that would be putting your team out another $30+ million in salary. So, I get it. Again, don't love it. But it definitely, you can tell the whole Sean Payton, Russell Wilson thing isn't working. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. Russell Wilson is going to get paid $39 million next season anyways, whether he plays for the Broncos or not. So it's going to be interesting to see if he wants to, what his future is going to hold. If he sort of goes and tries to find another spot in the NFL to be a quarterback, or if he hangs it up and decides that, I'm making enough money not playing, I'm going to go ahead and call it a career and maybe hop into the booth somewhere or join, some pregame show. I think that's going to be interesting for me to see is, if he really has that hunger to keep playing, or if this is sort of the end of his career. Because certainly when he was with the Seahawks, he was definitely it seemed like he was working towards what could be a Hall of Fame career. And then he went to the Broncos and things did not look good in Denver at all. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens if he wants to go try with another team, or if this is the end of the Russell Wilson in the NFL. And Ed here is saying, dumb, keep trying to still win if they have a shot to get into the playoffs. Certainly you would think that, hey, if you have a chance, you would put your best foot forward. But if they think that's with Jarrett Stidham, then it's with Jarrett Stidham, I guess. But I don't think many people would think that's the case. Now to some more Lions-focused ones here, Joe. This first statement, the Detroit Lions will finish with higher than the number 3 seed in the NFC. Of course, since we won the NFC North, we are ahead of Tampa Bay, who is the number 4 seed. So we're guaranteed at least the number 3 seed. Do you think that the Lions can finish higher than number 3? Are you buying or selling this?
So they will not finish higher.
I'm going to go ahead and like I said, we're heading into the new year. Why not be a little optimistic? I'm going to say buy on this one. The 49ers are playing the Commanders, who I don't think will give them much trouble, but they are playing the Rams the final week of the season. So I could see a scenario in which those Rams come in and potentially steal a game against the 49ers at the end of the season, especially because the Rams are more likely to be fighting for their playoff lives in that game than the 49ers are. And then at that point, if the 49ers lose, the Eagles are playing the Cardinals and the Giants, but there's definitely a chance we could at least move up to the number 2 seed, if not the number 1 seed. So, you know what? I'm going to say that the Lions have been stacking opportunities all season long, and I'm going to buy this one and say that they pull a little more magic here before the end of the year.
They don't need to press. They don't need to exert themselves before the playoffs start. They need to prepare for the playoffs.
And Ed on this one, he is a sell. Spoiler alert, he's going they will lose at Dallas this week. Already locking in that Dallas pick there from Ed. Next up, we have Dan Campbell will win Coach of the Year. Are you buying or selling this one, Joe?
Buy.
This one is a tough one. I definitely think he's done enough with the Lions to deserve it, and I'm going to say buy as well. But there is a lot of competition, I think, this year for the award. There are a number of coaches that I think have their teams overperforming, but I'm with you. I think Dan Campbell did enough where he definitely has my vote. Of course, we might be a little biased, but I'm gonna buy for Dan Campbell as well in this one. And then last but not least, Joe, our last question here. Both Montgomery and you actually had mentioned this earlier, but both Montgomery and Gibbs will finish the season with over 1,000 yards rushing. Are you buying or selling this one?
Buy.
I like it too. I'm going to buy as well. I know I think they're both within 200 yards of doing it, and they both we rush for like 141 yards per game. So I definitely think there's a chance between this week and next week that they get the job done, and we can celebrate 2,000-yard rushers, which will be amazing. I'm definitely down for that. And Ed here chiming in about Dan Campbell going by. He's most deserving considering our history. And I would say, yeah, that's important. You have to look at the context and the fact that he was able to lead us to our first division title in 30 years. Definitely has my vote. All right. So we've gone through now. We've done our buy or sell. In terms of hot butts, there hasn't been any real movement in terms of head coaches. Of course, we had the most recent person fired was Brandon Staley, but since then, everything's been pretty calm. Of course, there's still plenty of people that are on the hot seat, but nothing really new to report there. In terms of the Kings of the North, of course, we talked about it a lot in this episode, but the Lions have secured their first NFC North title and now sit on the throne. And we'll see if anyone can dethrone us next year. But as of now, your King of the North is the Detroit Lions. So congratulations to the team. And now we'll take a quick look here at the playoff picture in general. So let's fire it up here. Oh, we're looking at the Chargers. Come back here. Here we go. So here is the current playoff picture as it sits on the AFC side of things. We have the Ravens, the number 1 seed, your Dolphins, number 2 seed, the Chiefs, the Jaguars, and then your wild card teams are the Browns, who have actually clinched a playoff spot, the Bills and the Colts. The interesting thing to note about the AFC is that only 3 of these teams have clinched playoff spots, those being the Ravens, the Dolphins, and the Browns. Everything else, these other 4 spots, are up in the air. On the NFC side of things, we have the 49ers, the Eagles, the Lions, who have all clinched their spots. And then the Buccaneers currently lead the race for the NFC South. Then we have the Cowboys, who have clinched a playoff spot in the 5 seed, the Rams, and the Seahawks. So we do have 4 teams in the NFC who have clinched, with just 3 spots remaining inside of the NFC, including the NFC South, which is currently in the hands of Tampa Bay. If we come down here and look, there is still very much on the AFC side of things a cluster of teams still competing for those wild card spots. Of course, when it comes to the AFC South, you still also have Jacksonville, Indianapolis, and Houston competing. But lots of teams at 7-8, 8-7. And then on the NFC side of things, there's also a good chunk of teams here with the Rams, Seattle, Minnesota, Atlanta, Green Bay, New Orleans, and yes, even the Bears still in this one. So definitely things will get ironed out here as we get towards the end of the season. But with just 2 games remaining, there's still quite a few spots left, so quite a bit for teams to fight for. But the Lions, of course, will get that home playoff game right now. Looks like we'll be playing the Rams, but we'll have to see how that changes as the weeks progress. All right, so that's your playoff picture. Joe, that just leaves us with talking about today's game against the Cowboys. Of course, that game is coming to you at 8:15 tonight. I want to say is kickoff time. It is the only Saturday game. I want to say they're doing it as a special Monday night game, is what I think ABC/ESPN is billing it as. So it'll be the Monday night crew. The Cowboys are favored to win this game. They're favored by 5.5 according to BetMGM. The over/under on the game is 52.5, with the money line being Detroit plus 200, Dallas minus 200. The Lions and the Cowboys have played each other 30 times, including 3 times in the postseason. And the Cowboys have won 18 of those games, and the Lions have won 12 of them. The Cowboys won their most recent game, which was played in 2022, and they won that game 24-6, although it is important to note that Amon-Ra St. Brown only played a few snaps in that game before he was knocked out with injury. So it'll be nice having him back for that game because we certainly missed him last year in that game against the Cowboys. And as we've talked about, the Lions are guaranteed at least the number 3 seed in the NFC playoffs. And if they win out, they can definitely still compete for that number 1 seed. The Cowboys are the number 5 seed in the playoffs and have clinched the playoff spot. But they can still technically win not only the division title over the Eagles, but there is actually a road in which they win the number 1 seed as well. But that requires not only the 49ers and Eagles to lose, but also the Lions to lose as well to help the Cowboys get to that number 1 seed. So it's a very long shot for that to happen. But something that is more impactful is the fact that the Cowboys are 7-0 at home, Joe. And as mentioned earlier, they average 39.9 points per game at home, which is the highest in the league. And they've outscored opponents 279 to 108. So very good team at home, Joe. The Lions are 4-0 in primetime games and 10-0 when wearing matching jerseys and pants. The Lions are wearing all white today, so they will be wearing matching uniforms. What do you think is going to come out on top, Joe? The 7-0 home streak for the Cowboys or the 4-0, 10-0 streak for the Lions? Which one do you think is going to prevail there? Do you think that?
Well, here's what's got to happen. Detroit's got to play situational football. What I mean by this is we need to stop them on 3rd down and longs. We need to convert our 3rd down and longs. We need to be able to run the ball on 3rd down and 4 and pick up a 1st down. We need to be able to run screen passes. We need to be able to run draws. We need to be able to stop them on 4th and goal from the 1-yard line. We need to be able to stop them from 1st and goal from the 5-yard line. We need to work on situational football in this game and work on becoming up clutch in difficult situations of football games. Work on situational football that's going to make or break and build your team for a championship. You can't go into the game just trying to play a generic football game. You got to structure around situational football. That's my game day story. You got to play situational football.
Yeah, I think this game is going to be an important measuring stick for the Lions heading into the playoffs. I definitely think that they can get in, and hopefully, I think we're all hopeful that since they have a home field playoff game, that they can at least get one playoff victory. I think what's really going to be, this game could be a really good roadmap to see if they can get more than that. The Cowboys are definitely a good team that's headed to the playoffs. So if they look good against the Cowboys, whether they win or not, will sort of help be a sort of a benchmark for me, I guess, to see, do I think that they can go further than just one playoff victory? Obviously when you make the playoffs, making the playoffs is one of the hardest things. And once you're there, as long as you're in the race, you have a chance. But I think playing against the Cowboys here, especially with how good the Cowboys have been at home, is going to be very, very interesting. One of the things we've seen the Ravens do, who are definitely one of the better teams in the NFL this season, even when they're playing other good teams, is they take, they force teams to play football that isn't their complementary style. Teams have a way that they like to play games, and when you can get ahead early and force them to play in different ways than they like to, that's what the Ravens have done really well to other good teams this season. It's what they did to the 49ers. It's what they did to us when they played us. So if we can come out here and establish ourselves early against the Cowboys, and sort of force them to play a game style that's different than what they've liked to on the season, I'll feel really good about the Lions' chances. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a very interesting game. We know Micah Parsons and what he can do from the pass rush side of things. Uh, we have to watch out for turnovers in this game because the Cowboys do have that cornerback who set the single season record for the most number of pick sixes in a single season. So we have to watch out for him. I forget his name, but he's certainly a guy to watch out for. And yeah, it's going to be a tough game. Like I said, I think it'll be a good measuring stick for what the what the Lions can potentially do in a postseason run. But I'm certainly looking forward to this game. So I think it's also, when you look at Buffalo, who recently had success against the Cowboys, one of the ways they did that was with their rushing game. The Cowboys come into this game ranked with the 19th best rush defense. They're giving up 115.7 yards per game. And the Lions have the third best rushing game in the league, coming in with 141.1 yards per game. So, it's, if there's a weakness for this Cowboys defense, it is their rushing defense. So the fact that we have a strength up against their weakness and we have our full starting offensive line again this week, I definitely like what our offense can do. I think it'll be interesting to see how our defense stacks up because Dallas at home, that offense has been red hot. Dak has looked really good. And I know Cam Sutton was questionable heading into this game. We've seen some improvement out of the defense in terms of their ability to generate takeaways, but it's going to be a very interesting game. But I suppose without further ado, Joe, we should head into our pick'em section here. I do have Jeffrey's pick for us, even though he was not able to attend again as he's recovering from his surgery. But he did go ahead and he is locking in the Lions for this one. Jeffrey, of course, is leading pick'em. He's 11-4. He's got that matching record with the Lions. Joe, both you and I are at 10-5, both picking the Lions last week. Who do you have this week in this matchup between the Cowboys and the Lions?
Dallas.
Going with Dallas. Locking them in. That would so I can either play the potential to make up the game against Jeffrey and then have us all be 11-5, or I can take a sip of that Kool-Aid and lock in the Lions. And you know what? I am going to, like I said, we're heading into the new year. We're going to be optimistic. I know Ed had mentioned earlier too that he's going with Dallas. I'm going to go, and we can see here he would love to see the Lions win, but he thinks the Cowboys will prevail and is taking Dallas. I'm going to go with the Lions in this one as well. So that puts me and Jeffrey for the Lions. Joe, you definitely have a chance here to catch Jeff. And I have a chance to fall into the basement all by myself with a loss. But you know what? I like. I'm gonna go with the boys in well, I guess they're wearing white, not Honolulu blue. But I'm going with the Lions in this one to get a victory on the road in Dallas. Stop them from going 8-0 on the season. All right. Well, all that's left to do is play the game, I guess, and we'll see how things turn out after this evening. Again, this is the only Saturday game being played today, and it's being played at 8:15. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Ed, as always, appreciate you commenting on the video as we go along and interacting with the show. And, of course, we're coming to you live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and Twitter. We will be back on next Thursday to talk about the Week 18 action. The Lions, of course, finishing out the season at home against the Vikings on January 7th. So we will be back next week to talk about that. But Joe, thanks again for tuning in, and just want to wish everybody a very happy new year, and we'll see you in 2024. Have a great Saturday, everybody, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye.